Hi, everyone. Welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Jennifer Aument. Jen is president for North America of the international infrastructure developer Transurban and a member of the company's executive committee. She has led the use of public-private partnerships for infrastructure funding in North America, including the advancement of more than $4 billion in transportation improvements in Virginia on the 495, 95, and 395 express lanes. Before joining Transurban, Jen worked for Bechtel Infrastructure to develop the Washington Metro Rail Silver Line. She has also served under 3 governors as a commissioner for the Virginia Port Authority, which oversees one of the largest shipping enterprises in the United States. Jen, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Good morning, Pat. Good to see you. Nice to have some colleagues this morning. I don't get to often spend the morning talking to lots of colleagues in the tolling industry, so it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you, and I want to give a shout out to George Zalachi and Pat Haran, who gave me this gift of a Garden State Parkway mug. And I understand from Diane Scacchetti, the commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Transportation, that it's a collector's item. So thank you very much. And to those who've sent mugs to the IBTTA corporate offices, I have to get in there and bring them, and we'll show them on screen very soon. And also, I want to wish happy Father's Day early to all the fathers out there and the father figures. We hope you have a great day with your family celebrating Father's Day. Well, we are going to take your questions today. So I want you to find the chat function on your screen. For most people, it's down the bottom of your screen. And we will read and listen to your questions a little bit later on. And also today, we're going to do something a little bit different, a little experiment. I'm going to ask you to give us a one-word answer to a question, a very specific question, but we'll get to that later in the program. But Jen, let's start with the express lanes, the 495 express lanes. Huge success, at least in my opinion. I use them all the time, but this was not a foregone conclusion. And I'd like you to sort of walk us through how you were able to engineer that and bring that to fruition.
Sure. Thank you for your business, by the way. We appreciate you as a valued customer, and I hope if you're in the area, you will go use the lanes multiple times today, because we could use the toll revenue, which I'm sure many of my colleagues here on this webinar can relate during this time. So it's interesting. I was telling Pat, I spent the morning with Bob Poole this morning on another webinar, and we were reflecting a little bit about the last 15 years or so, and in that development time period, really for the 495 express lanes. And we were, I was reflecting that it was so hard during that time, sort of the mid 2000s, like 2005, 2006, 2007, where we were developing that project. There were barely any managed lanes in the country at that point in time. SR 91, San Diego, and then Pass was up and running, but really it was very early. And so when we were developing that project, you would have thought that we were trying to convince stakeholders that we were going to manage the weather. When we told them that we were going to create a toll facility that would be dynamically priced, and that we would all guarantee a fast and reliable trip on the Capitol Beltway in Washington during rush hour. And I spent so many time with audiences who just laughed me out of the room, because you might have said, yeah, and we're also going to make sure it doesn't rain tomorrow, because it was about as realistic. And fast forward to now, where we have managed lanes in pretty much every large metropolitan area in the country, and different stages of development. And we've got now a 7-year history of operations on 495, where we have indeed delivered on that promise. And that means average speeds of 65 miles an hour. You have a 500% increase in carpooling on the Capitol Beltway. We have across our network in Northern Virginia, on a typical non-COVID season, about 120,000 carpool and transit customers that we serve every day. And then we have a lot of families who have really come to enjoy the product that we're providing of that fast and reliable trip. They tend to be young families, 35 to 45, 2 kids, 2 jobs. Most make under $100,000 a year, and they have really folded the express lanes on 495 into their box of tools to help manage busy lives and busy schedules. And they really, it's interesting from our research, they really think about our product not like they have thought about the Little River Turnpike, which is down the street, which was one of the first toll roads in the country. But they think of it like they think of Amazon Prime or Instacart, which is a grocery store delivery service. It's something, yes, they're going to pay a premium for. They're probably not going to use it every time. But when it makes sense to try to manage busy lives, it's there for them. So it's really been an interesting journey on Beltway. And I think the key to success, and I know that many of you are exemplifying this in parts of the country, I think ultimately the key to success on Beltway was focusing on the customer first and making sure, how do you make sure in the way you design the product, in the way that you're thinking about technology solutions, that you think about the end product for customers and develop a product that's going to be attractive to them and going to meet their needs. I think that's where we started on Beltway, and that's why it's been a success. And I think from the tolling industry, more broadly, the more that we can change consumer sentiment, that a toll isn't just about paying for a bridge, a toll is about better service, I think the more politically palatable that becomes, and the more opportunities we'll have to expand the tool to meet transportation needs.
Jen, let's continue down that path of satisfying the customer. We talked earlier that when you make the argument about toll financing and the transaction, that doesn't resonate so well with people. Even politicians, who are trying to find ways to fund and finance infrastructure with scarce tax resources. Talk to us about how you shift the argument when you talk about genuine partnerships that are focused on the outcomes and customers and communities.
Yeah, I think I might actually touch a little on brownfields or public toll assets, and I think that in this context, we have some examples in the U.S. market of public-private partnerships on existing toll facilities, like the Chicago Skyway, like the Indiana Toll Road. I know there are many of you involved in those projects, and I know that they've had positive impacts in many ways. But what I look at with a more modern sort of solution in the conversations that we're having with government officials today is a lot of the discussion, right or wrong, around some of those transactions was around the big check. You have a big upfront payment that was going to either meet transportation needs or other policy needs, and that the dialogue was around the big check. And that was the time, right? And where we were in the tolling industry, perhaps at that time. When I look forward to today and the conversations we're having with policymakers and government decision makers around, putting these long-term partnerships in place where you're bringing the best of government and the best of the private sector to an existing toll facility, providing more flexibility to maximize the capital structure and to put long-term performance requirements in place and create predictable, reliable toll increases so they're not political jumping around toll prices that can be hard for customers. When you start talking about that in the context of how do we work together to improve safety through these partnerships, how do we unlock, we'd say, just as a hypothetical, in the top 10 largest public toll road authorities in the US, Transurban estimates you could unlock about $300 billion of value and put about $180 billion to work to support transportation needs. How do we work together to do those things while also making sure that we're modernizing tunnels with new technology, and we have resources to do that, that we're creating reductions in customer fees, that we're creating more affordable toll price regimes over the course of many decades. So I think that conversation, to me, this is a new modern approach, and it's a tribute, Pat, to IBTTA and your members and many people on the call here. As we have colleagues, we have started to introduce some of these more customer safety initiatives and look at uplifting customer service. I think I've found in my discussions with decision makers that this is a more comprehensive sort of discussion than just what can you do with the big check. And I think it's a good evolution of the dialogue here in the US, and we'll get some hopefully good partnerships that come out of it.
Jen, you've mentioned the big check and the possibility of generating perhaps $300 billion in value through certain machinations. And yes. You haven't used the term yet, but I'm going to use it. It's sort of sitting there in the background.
I'm avoiding it.
Asset recycling. Okay, this comes up in every conversation probably that you have. And I want to engage the entire audience right now. We're only about 10 minutes into our discussion. And I'm going to ask everybody in our viewing audience to please write one word in the chat that tells us, that expresses your feelings about the term or the concept of asset recycling. All right.
And keep it clean.
Keep it clean. This is a family show. All right. So we want you to go to your keyboards now. You got to actually do some work here. And I want you to tell me in one word your feelings about the concept and the reality of asset recycling. So what do we have? All right, Jen, I'm going to go through these and I'm going to give you a minute to respond. Okay.
Okay.
So okay, we have untapped opportunity, turn the roads pink, unclear, efficiency, challenging, sustainability, magic, question mark, efficient, danger, exclamation point, fabulous, survival, necessary, leverage, innovative, sustainability, confusing. That's the one I would put up there. Optimization, must have, beneficial. Wow, we're getting good responses here. Horrible, potential. That's the hardest word so far, Jen, I think.
That's okay. I've heard worse.
The future, jargon, liability. All right. So Jen, you've heard what your audience, this is a friendly audience, you know, these are your people. So talk to us about asset recycling.
The word that comes into my mind is education, right? Because I think it goes to, again, a misnomer of some of what these partnerships can look like and their financial transactions. So there is confusion out there about what they can deliver. And probably all of those words are true in some cases. I think this is a model that is just not going to be the right strategy for every toll authority in the country. So we use these hypotheticals just to quantify the value, right? But should all top 10 largest public toll authorities in the US be transitioned to partnerships through a recycling program? Of course not, right? I think you have some communities in some markets where you can develop partnerships that make a lot of sense. Now that may have to do with the condition of the toll network. It may have to do with policy priorities. It may have to do with a toll price environment, the capital structure. You look at the whole host of different factors and identify those areas where it does indeed make sense. And you can then again bring the best of government and the best of the private sector to forge a long-term partnership that creates opportunities to be able to deliver something to the community and to customers. It's not going to be the case every single time. So in some cases, that horrible comment, some cases probably be horrible, right? But some cases it's going to be exceptional outcomes, and it's really looking at where this suits. It's just like any other transportation solution. Sometimes tolling is the solution. Sometimes it's transit. Sometimes we'll use fees and other mechanisms. So yes, this is right size for some networks, but not for all. I'll give you an example of Transurban's experience in this area and what that's actually delivered in a market in a partner where it did make sense. And that's in Brisbane in the Queensland market. It's the northern part of Australia on the East Coast, fabulous beaches and beautiful weather for those of you when we start traveling again. Transurban actually entered a partnership. It was a $7 billion partnership on a network of toll roads in Queensland and worked to actually upgrade services and extend and improve that network. And here are some of the outcomes that we have delivered in the few years that we've been there. We're saving customers about $80 million in fees a year through a reduced fee program. We've had a 53% reduction in vehicle crashes and a 71% reduction in customer complaints. So we've seen a situation where we were able to unlock $7 billion that Queensland then could use to help support other transportation priorities, but also delivered a better service to customers. Now, it's not because in the private sector, we're better than the public sector. As we know, as colleagues, all of us, whether the public sector or private sector, we all have some great things to bring to the table. But sometimes, as in the case of Queensland, structurally, by entering the partnership, it provided opportunities to be able to make some of these enhancements. We've also have an extension project that put about $1.5 billion of economic activity into the market. So things that we've done to be able to improve that network. And so I hate the term asset recycling. I think that we should look at long-term partnerships. That's how we ought to characterize these things because that's what they are. And I think we ought to focus on those projects that make sense. They're going to have better customer outcome. And that's not every toll facility. I will say, and perhaps some of you will have some empathy here, the politically driven toll price regime is tough on customers. We've looked at actually some of the largest public toll authorities in the country, and we'll see if you had a long-term concession where toll prices were CPI linked and they had that reliability, they would actually be as much as 5 times lower now over the last 10-year period than what we see is this political knee-jerk, toll prices are up, toll prices are down, for all good reasons, political and meeting needs, but by putting in a long-term partnership, that is one of the benefits is you can smooth out that line and create predictability for customers and affordability for customers in that toll price increase. So a lot of education required. Sometimes it's well suited, and then other times it might not be the right fit.
Jen, thanks for the example of Queensland. Very, very helpful. And I think education really is key. And I want to shift to a topic that you talked about on another recent webinar that was put on by the Hudson Institute a couple of months ago. You were with David Horner, Tyler Duvall, and DJ Gribben. And this centered around the issue of opaqueness and incentives and workforce. And one of the things that DJ Gribben said is that we literally have no fundamental information in terms of what it costs to build basic infrastructure. And that opaqueness, that lack of transparency directly contributes to the problem of an unusually high cost of infrastructure in this country. You've talked about ways that you can save money for customers, and DJ puts his finger on sort of the opaqueness of it, which results or can result in higher costs. Talk to me about how we resolve those kinds of issues.
Well, I think one of the things that I would note on that is, and this is sort of against perhaps the perception, but I do think public-private partnerships do create a greater level of greater level of transparency when it comes to the costs of developing and delivering infrastructure. And we've got some projects around the country right now that are facing some challenges in the tolling industry, and the other projects that are P3. So I-4 has hit some challenges. 69, you've got the Purple Line. You've got some projects that have faced some challenges. And I always worry and lose sleep at night that anyone who's done multi-billion-dollar major projects knows they hit challenges. That they're tough projects to deliver. And a lot of the issues with those projects had nothing to do with tolling, nothing to do with public-private partnerships, but we have a lot of great transparency to what's happening in those projects because of the nature of public-private partnerships. If you want to know what's happening on our Fredericksburg Extension project right now, you can go on to Emma and get the latest report on construction. We report to a whole host of stakeholders through public-private partnerships that really creates that greater transparency and how much is it actually costing. What are the challenges associated with the project? What are our strategies to overcome them? It does demand a much higher degree of transparency than a traditional project. So I think using that as a model on how to make sure that you're being clear about the realities of these projects, I think is a positive step forward. I do want to address workforce a little bit. If you ask anyone in the industry, I'll be interested, and I'm sure that others hear feedback from others on this call. What I lose sleep about the most is workforce. And I know many of you do too. And how do you meet the talent needs, whether it's on the operating side, long-term maintenance, whether we can get the talent we need to deliver on an aspirational growth agenda. And I think there's another issues that Transurban is working on there that I'll share. One is inclusivity. I think one of the things that, the Father Day is coming up this weekend. Transurban will be we have a public holiday on Friday as we celebrate Juneteenth, which was the enforcement of the end of slavery in Texas. So that will be a public holiday at Transurban on Friday, because we're working a lot to make sure that we can continue to strengthen our culture of inclusivity and respect and understanding, so that we can sort of raise the bar and making sure that we're not keeping brilliant talent on the sidelines in our industry. And so diversity and inclusion is a big goal for us to make sure that we can attract and create a culture that keeps and creates opportunities for all employees, because we're so desperate for workforce in this industry. We can't be leaving, brilliant talent on the sidelines because we fell short in creating that kind of culture. So that's a big focus for us right now. And then also a big focus is keeping our employees safe, as we have control room operators like many of you do, and construction colleagues in construction that are out there, continuing to keep construction jobs and the economy moving forward. How do we make sure that we put protections in place to keep them safe, and keep our workforce engaged while we're having a lot more meetings like this and a lot less meetings in person. So a lot of focus on workforce right now, getting that talent we need, making sure we create an inclusive environment where access to opportunities for everyone, and then keeping our employees safe spends a lot of time at Transurban focused on those issues right now, as I know many of you are.
I think everybody is grappling with workforce issues right now, especially in this environment where a lot of people are not in their normal workplaces, and trying to recruit and also retention is probably a challenge as well. We are taking your questions. My guest today is Jen Aument. She's the president for North America of Transurban. We have been talking about public-private partnerships, asset recycling, serving the customer better, and a host of other issues. And we do have a couple of questions here. There's one question about how is the experience of Transurban in Brisbane different from the, quote, big checks in Indiana and Chicago Skyway?
Yeah, I think, and I want to be clear, I'm not criticizing either one of those transactions. It's more the dialogue around them. There's no question that there are programs being in place in those roadways. We have some Transurban alumni involved in those that we're very proud of the work that they've done. So there's no question that there are benefits coming from that. It was really referencing more the dialogue. And those of us in the industry will remember that a lot of the dialogue was around the financial outcome and the financial transaction. And while we have great operators in there that are forging improvements, and that's fantastic, the dialogue in the policy arena and the community dialogue was around the big check. And so I think if you talk about Queensland, how was it different? Queensland, there was a big check. There's no question of that. But the dialogue around those roadways, and including some formal dialogues with testimony to government, has been much more around customer and community outcomes than financial outcomes. And so you have all of those outcomes in a transaction like that. And it's just trying to bring the customer community outcomes into the dialogue so they're aligned with that financial outcome. And I know that I mentioned this, the first thing I led with was a great big number, $150 billion, right? But it can't be the whole story. And it's not the whole story on those partnerships in the US, like the Indiana Toll Road. But in these policy dialogues, I think we need to make sure we're talking about the whole story. And I don't think that we were back then. I think it was more heavily weighted to the financial outcomes.
Right, right. Here's another question, Jen, from one of our viewers. Have there been any instances where HOV-only lanes that have struggled to attract users have subsequently been converted to hot or HOV lanes with positive gains in usage by making it an option for single occupancy vehicles?
Yeah, so our 95 project is a great example. We did have a traditional HOV facility. It's actually a 40-year history in the 95 corridor, from a bus-only lane to an HOV facility, to HOV with a hybrid option, to then an express or managed lane option. And we've seen that journey on the 95 corridor over the last 40 years. And that's been all about how do we maximize the capacity. And so you're seeing on the 95 corridor, and I'll talk about in a non-COVID environment because it's not a typical environment now, but typically on 95 corridor, what we see is we have been able to improve enforcement in that facility. We've been able to extend and provide access to that facility to new communities and to new commercial and employment centers. And we've seen, because of that, things like reversing the lanes. It's a reversible system. We've been able to reduce the amount of time that 95 is offline, to be able to reduce that keeps that capacity open. So all those improvements have led to new options for toll paying customers, but it's also led to an enhanced experience for our carpooling customers, and also opened up to new carpooling customers as we provided and extended with our partners in Virginia to new communities and new access points along that road. So I think it's a perfect example of how carpools who were on 95 5 years ago should have a better, and are indeed having a better and more reliable experience now, carpooling on a managed lane facility, while others now have access to be able to use that capacity, which obviously creates improved mobility for the corridor wide.
All right, Jen, thank you. So we are taking your questions. I'm with Jen Aument, the North American president for Transurban. And I want to ask you, while we're waiting for more questions to come in, a couple of weeks ago, a sinkhole appeared on one of your facilities. And
Yeah.
it's never a good thing when something like that happens. But you were telling me that you see that as a metaphor for a lot of other things, like what's happening in operations and routine
Yeah.
maintenance, capital planning, strategic visioning, et cetera. Talk to me about the sinkhole metaphor for you.
I'm glad that stuck. We have, it is such a challenging time for all of us as employers, as transportation service providers. We're watching a revenue that is just a fraction of what we are anticipating, in dealing with the real life financial impacts of that. And how do you keep your workforce in place? And how do you overcome some of those financial challenges? How do you deal with the complexity of safety issues around COVID? How do you make sure that you're being there and supportive to your employees who are struggling rightfully with the discord and racism that we're seeing in the environment? All these things are critically important, but they're also taking a lot of management's time and attention. They should be. And so what we've said to our team is, amidst all this last weekend, and all of you will relate to this, as many of you are operators, we had some disruption that shut down 95 for a little while. So our control room team is working in partnership with law enforcement and regional partners to manage that. We had a sinkhole open up on a ramp on 395 that we identified, and we're able to close quickly to make sure with our partners at VDOT that we were ensuring safety for customers in that area, and are working there to make sure we put a solution in place that ensures that safety long term. And then we had the summer driving season kickoff on 95, and people speeding at rates over 90 miles an hour on the way to the beach and trying to deal with the safety issues related to that. So I think it just goes to show that while we're dealing with a very challenging broader environment as operators, the road goes on, and there are things that we need to make sure that we cover. And I've said to my team, and we have reminded each other, as we are focused on so many things, and lots of our colleagues are home, homeschooling their kids while working full time, and there's a lot on right now. Where is the sinkhole in your operations? Where is the sinkhole in your business that's opening up underneath that you might not notice because you're focused on all these other things? And so we've really tried to challenge each other at Transurban to say, okay, where's that sinkhole? Where can we not be watching right now? Because you only have so many capacity in the day, where there could be a safety issue, or there could be a long-term issue that we certainly don't want as a business. So we're trying to remind each other of that, and keep our eyes on the ball while we're trying to manage this difficult time.
Jen, you mentioned Amazon Prime earlier and talked about tolling and managed lane facilities as providing a higher level of service. And Amazon Prime not only provides that higher level of service, but I think they're also dedicated to local community activities and serving the community. Another question from our viewers comes: tell us about the various ways you contribute to the community and local transit, thinking about Amazon moving into Arlington.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one way that we contributed on the Amazon front, I'm really proud of this, is Virginia. This has a little bit less flexibility in how it spends its transportation dollars, in a good way, because the legislature here has put into place some really good targets around economic productivity and congestion relief, but it is a less flexible system than it used to be in the old days. And so Virginia was looking at ways to be able to meet a variety of priorities and also free up capital to be able to make some transportation improvements as part of attracting Amazon as their long-term transportation partner. Transurban worked with Virginia to make changes to our concession agreement and partnering agreement on 95 to accelerate payments from Transurban, to be able to fund a couple $100 million of transportation improvements that then freed up some funds that Virginia was able to use as part of their package to attract Amazon. That's a long-term partnership. That's trying to solve problems together, both from an operations perspective and a financial perspective, to be able to support our region. So that's something that we helped, that we're proud to help Virginia as they were putting a great package together for Amazon. In terms of other community initiatives, Transurban is long-term in our approach. So like many of you, we're in the community for decades to come. And so we take our role very seriously. We have a grant program that's over $1 million now and has helped more than 250 local organizations. And these are a whole variety of projects, from food banks to help during the COVID period, to environmental projects for local communities adjacent to our roadways, to educational programs for students on STEM issues in the community. So a wide variety of needs, and we really go into the community and seek their help in helping us find ways to be able to strengthen the community. And then, of course, our core business is a big part of that. We're continuing to work with Virginia to make changes to our system to better meet the needs of the community. As Virginia's transformed and Fairfax County transformed Tyson's Corner, Capital One opened up a expansion of their headquarters. We're working then with Fairfax County and Virginia. There's a new access point to our express lanes to be able to better connect transit and the toll option to that community. We've are now advancing a new project that's going to provide improved connectivity to Quantico, which is one of the largest military installations here. So to connect Quantico directly into our system and provide that access. Same with the Mark Center, which is another military site along 95. So again, it goes back to that long-term partnership. How are you working in partnership with government to evolve over time to meet transportation needs? And I think I would add to that, one of the big components we're focused on now is autonomous vehicles. And how do we prepare our community and our network for this new technology when it looks to actually implementation? So we have a US DOT grant and partners at Virginia Tech and the auto manufacturers to actually create a test bed on 95 and try to overcome operational issues to get these autonomous vehicles ultimately implemented and creating value and uplifting safety for our customers.
Jen, I want to say thanks for joining us today. It's been fantastic. Our guest today is Jen Aument, the president for North America with the international infrastructure firm Transurban. Just a couple of announcements before we go. Tomorrow, Peter Norton will be our guest on the Brave New World webinar series. He's going to talk about a lot of interesting things that have to do with leadership. Next Tuesday, June 23rd at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we have a webinar called Blockchain Demystifying a Powerful Business Tool, led by Matt Milligan of Milligan Partners. Next Thursday, we have a special webinar that involves the DBEs and the Council of Platinum Sponsors Roundtable. And then we want to remind you to apply for the Toll Excellence Awards. The deadline is July 1st, 2020. You can find more information on the website. And I have to correct some earlier misinformation I provided, and that is that the judges, this is true information, the judges are encouraging everyone to consider submitting programs or projects that reflect efforts to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 pandemic as part of the existing 6 categories. So there isn't a new category. We simply invite you to submit projects that reflect on your coping with the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, next week, our guest on Café IBTTA will be Andy Vermeer with the Bay Area Toll Authority. Jen, thank you so much again for being with us today. It was great to have you. And thanks to all of our viewers for being with us and for participating with your questions and comments. Thanks.
Thank you,
We'll see you
Matt.
next
Have a good
week.
day.
You too, Jen. Bye-bye.